Well, the day has finally arrived. It is the Town Hall Summit 2.0. I am delighted to have you here. It's really exciting that you're all here to join me. I mean, like, I can't believe how much preparation has gone into this, but how wonderful it is that you're all here. So, we have a really packed day today. This is the second iteration of a summit that I did back in May, the Town Hall Summit. This is 2.0. That was the Town Hall Summit. But this is the second iteration. The first iteration, we spent primarily talking about COVID because that's what was happening at the time. Um, it was 2 weeks before George Floyd. Lots has happened since then. And I had lots of requests for 2.0. When are we going to have more conversations? When can we get more leaders involved? How can we just have a platform to talk about all the things that have happened? And so here we are. We've added a couple of things to the format. We have fireside chats this time, two amazing fireside chats. In addition to the plenary sessions, we also have the premiere of something called The Youth Are Watching. I'm really excited and proud about this piece of work. The Youth Are Watching started as me wanting to include youth in the conversations about the future, what they expect for business, what they expect business and global leaders to do. So what started as me having conversations about what they expected of business and global leaders evolved into a 45-minute documentary about their experiences, and you are so in for a treat. So to start off today, I have a fireside chat with an amazing gentleman, which I'm going to come to in a second, followed by the first plenary session, C-Suite Spotlight, Best in Class. And then we'll go to our second plenary session. We'll actually have the Youth Are Watching in between for 20 minutes. And then we'll go to the second plenary session, which is the myth of hard to find diverse talent. Exciting, great content, great speakers. Thank you for being here. Let's get into it. So let me introduce my guest, a good friend, but also somebody that I really admire. And I've watched his career and watched the trajectory just kind of go off the charts. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. I'm not going to say his name yet. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him first. He's the COO of Parkwood Entertainment. He was the former head of sports and entertainment marketing at JP Morgan Chase. He was a manager of digital distribution and business development at HBO. He was a VP of strategy development and new business development for the National Football League, the NFL. He is a very proud Morehouse College graduate, class of 91, like me, and also an MBA from Stanford Business School. A couple more things I'm going to say about him. A recent appointee to the board of the WWE. And also, and I don't know if this is still the case, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but it probably still, but at least was a board member of the New York Roadrunners, who's responsible for the New York City Marathon. Please welcome my friend, Steve Pamon.
Thank you so much for having me, India. Looking very forward to this talk.
I'm glad to see you here. It's really great to have you. And why don't we just jump right in? The reason that we're here and the reason that we're having this conversation is because there are so many things happening in the world at the moment that are impacting businesses across sector. We have COVID-19, we have the racial reckoning, we have a financial recession, we have elections. There are just so many things that impact our ability as business people to kind of carry on marching through and lead our people, but also kind of respond to all of the stimuli that we're getting from places far and wide. And so, just kind of kicking in and starting, what's your view of, especially in the entertainment industry, right? Because those of us lay people who are simply in the business sector don't have as much insight. But you are in the entertainment space the hope for the world in a lot of ways. You take our minds off of all the things that are happening, but yet and still again, you have to respond to all of those things. So talk to me a little bit about what that looks like and how that's showing up and how those things are impacting your ability to do business, both from a leadership perspective, but also in terms of producing content for people, given kind of some of the challenges around being remote?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's an excellent question. There's a lot to unpack in that question, but let me break it down into sort of thirds. Frankly, the first thing out of three is candidly, companies are made up of people. And the way I look at it is people have a personal dimension, they have a professional acumen, but they also have a spiritual center. And I think everything you described not only challenges us personally from a health perspective, right? It challenges us professionally because you just have businesses that aren't functioning with the economy being the way it is. We're social creatures, and most businesses depend on some sort of interaction. So that's obviously hurting. But more than anything, the challenge for this time period is that it really rips at your spiritual center because you need faith, candidly, to explain the unexplainable. And most things, whether it's the natural disasters, to your point, the social unrest, or the virus that you really can't see or feel, but obviously is extremely dangerous, really tears at your spiritual center. And so, as that gets into the second point, how you basically manage companies, again, are a collection of people. So, those are the challenges that you face as an individual, the company you face as collective. You really have to say, I have to hit all three fronts. So the basic thing is, how do you actually take care of your people from a health and safety perspective, right? How do you actually make sure professionally you have empathy, right? Everyone is trained to do professional challenges. Everyone is trained for shareholder value. This period is going to really require you to have professional empathy, right? It's much better to get 80% of the work done over time than try to get 100% of the work done for a short period and then break down. That's a very hard thing to do, easy thing to say. And that's the big challenge. But even bigger than that is, how do you create some sort of spiritual true north? And I'm not talking about from a religious perspective, but how do you get people to believe as a collective that this thing too shall pass? Right? Particularly when no individual knows. There's no expert you can bring in. There's no outside consulting firm. There's nothing you can do to reassure people factually. But that means you have to do everything in your power to reassure people from a faith perspective. And the only way to do that, and that's the third thing, is unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it's a challenge every day, we have to be the answer. Right. And so whether it's me as an executive or whether it's the content we create, everything has to be an answer to those questions. So I see entertainment going through the most challenging period I've seen in my lifetime of 30 years working in the business. However, what gets me optimistic is also see more hope. There's more of a return, to the community-based entertainment efforts, right? You're now seeing virtual reality things, but not so much from a digital perspective, but a real community perspective. And comments are really great. You now have user generated content coming in exponential terms. We joke around, everyone's a talk show host, everyone's a home chef, everyone, right now is Oprah Winfrey. But I actually don't mind that, because guess what? The more engaged the consumer is in creating their own content, the more they know what content they want from a professional perspective. And frankly, the more you appreciate it. Just because you cook at home doesn't mean you'll never go out to a restaurant. In fact, you'll probably appreciate that more. So I really look at it again as threefold. It's, how do I just deal better as a person? How do I deal better managing people? And then how can we help those people create content for other people like me, so it becomes circular?
That was a great answer. And you know what that means? The interview's done. You've answered everything I needed to know in one question. No, I'm kidding. But that was a wonderful answer, because it really looked at each piece of what people have to consider, as we kind of walk through this. So you sit on a number of boards, right? And again, it's the same kind of challenge. Like, there's a lot of challenge around what you do next, particularly when there's no answer, kind of as you laid out. There's no, this is what we do. What are some of the processes that folks are going through in boardrooms to try to determine what to do next? What are the questions? So you kind of laid out, your questions, but are those the same conversations that you're having in boardrooms? And how well and how quickly are people able to adjust, considering that they're humans too, and are as impacted as everyone else by the things that are going on?
Well, I think there's no standard answer, because there's no standard question. I think the beautiful thing is the conversations, right? So, the collective, I tell people all the time, I actually don't like the statement bet on yourself, right? Because I actually believe that's a very high risk thing, but I do believe in betting on the collective, right? And so in the boardroom, no different than any other social circle, you have individuals which are, up, which are down, which feels sideways. But the beautiful thing is that, and again, this is just one person's perspective, adversity actually does breed togetherness, right? Because everyone feels a common enemy. And that common enemy right now is the uncertainty. And so what I find, particularly with, WWE, which is a new board that I'm on, is that it's no longer the quarterly meeting. The folks get together, outside the meeting on Zoom, and, we just talk. Sometimes it's about business, sometimes it's about life, but often it gets back to what's a better answer on how we can be better. Because if we're better, then the company's better, right? New York Roadrunners is very similar. But I take it past the boardroom. I look at it, candidly as my own personal board, right? Life. You and I reconnected during this time, right? We always talked, we always were pleasant, but I've talked to you more in the last 9 months than I had in the previous 10 years, right? And I don't believe that's accidental. I believe that's because I needed someone, you needed someone, and our collective, right, from Spellman and Morehouse gets together every week, right? That's unbelievable, right? If we had tried to get together every week last year at homecoming, even proposed that, I don't think people would be averse to it, but there wouldn't be a real galvanizing force. Now we get together every week religiously, and those calls sometimes go, 5, 6, 7 hours, right? And by the way, there is no, drinking, there is no homecoming dance, there is no pomp and circumstance. It's just us. And I really, truly believe that there's nothing positive you could say about this time period overall, but I truly believe there's some stuff that, come out of this that honestly I won't go back to. And when I say I won't go back to, I won't go back to not communicating with people like this, because I know I'm better. And I know the adversity made me better. So when you ask what's happening in these boardrooms, I think the boardrooms are just a microcosm for what's happening in life, which is that, at the end of the day, everybody needs each other right now more than ever. Sometimes we argue, sometimes we get along, but you need that interaction.
Awesome. So, I have to make a little admission here, because our participants won't know this, that we're actually university classmates, and that we have a long history. We've known each other for a long time, and we've watched each other kind of take this walk through our corporate experience. And that, and again, because we also have a global audience, people won't know about the relationship between Spelman and Morehouse, which are two universities in the US, in the southern states of the US, in Atlanta and Georgia, which are historically Black colleges and universities. We have a very unique culture, a very, very unique culture. And as you can tell, 30 years later, we still act like we're at university together and talk to each other every week and spend 6 or 7 hours on a call on Friday nights, kind of going through our life. And there could be 40, 50, 60 people on these calls sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I'm saying that to say, the relationship piece of this, and, I want to kind of walk down this lane next. Relationships have shifted exponentially because we've slowed down. We've had to stop, right? We're not, on planes every week. We're not, going here, there, and everywhere. We've stopped, and it's brought to bear some of the things that are most important in our lives, and it is about people and about relationship. So here's my next question for you. As you think about how your relationships are evolving, and how the intersection, what's really been interesting is the intersection between, like, my business relationships have become very personal because my kid might be running through the back, or somebody's dog, jumps on their lap, but it's really kind of making folks more human. What
Yeah.
have you seen around that in terms of your business relationships that may have once been a lot more formal?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think the business relationships have gotten deeper, right? And I think it's because now that everyone has to force long-term value, right? Which is different from the short-term transaction. We literally, things have to pay off over the next 2 years. They can't pay off over the next 2 months. There literally isn't that ability anymore, which I think is fine. I mean, I've learned a lot of lessons, but one of the biggest lessons I learned, they taught us at McKinsey, that was almost 20 years ago when I was a management consultant there. And we used to have this framework called 8, 10, 12. And literally it serves me to this day. If you take a sheet of paper and you fold it landscape and you literally say, let's take 2 lines, draw down the center. So you have 3 columns. 8 becomes your cost, 10 becomes your price, and 12 becomes your value. And the reason why we call it 8, 10, 12 is that if I can make something for 8, sell it to you for 10 that you think is worth 12, then by definition, you're going to keep coming back, because that's the difference between a transaction and a relationship. Did you actually get something out of it? Did I get something out of it? And one of the things that, and I tell people this all the time, that framework, I illustrated it from a monetary perspective, but it actually applies to life. If every interaction I seek on purpose, right, to give you more than you expect, right, you're going to want to have more interactions with me. If those interactions actually don't really cost me anything, it doesn't cost me anything to be here, right, then it's profitable for me, right? And the orientation of being a giver as opposed to going out and trying to be a harvester, I think I see from more people, frankly, because there's not much to harvest. But what I think people will understand is that's actually going to create more of a bounty for us in the long term. And trust me, especially in the entertainment business, everyone talks about the difference between digital and analog being the biggest question. That hasn't been the issue. People have been fighting upgrades since the CD came out. The truth of the matter is, it's fighting between transactions and relationships. The people that are successful build relationships with their customers in the supply chain. People are unsuccessful, transactions, right? That's why it is a beehive. That's why it's a Dallas Cowboys fan club. That's why it's a Manchester United fan club. You have people who are fanatics. That literally is how the word fan came about. But you don't build fanatics with a short-term view. That is stuff that has tradition. That's stuff that's built on reciprocal value. Why do people, I mean, think football, and I'm talking world football, not just American football. What would make an executive, right, literally change clothes, wear the uniform of a club that he doesn't play for or belong to, or she doesn't play for and belong to, go sit, and this is talking about even after COVID, right? Sit with other individuals in their home. And if they aren't wearing the kit in a certain way, or don't have the proper scarf, or didn't eat the same food, they literally feel like they let the team down, and somehow that impacts performance. That's a fanatic, because I didn't have the proper stew, because I didn't drink 3 pints of beer, therefore my team actually is at risk. That's psychological. And I don't think that's a problem. I love it because that breeds attachment. And that's what actually gets you the profit. It's who's there for you in these times, right? That's when you have a relationship. I tell people all the time, the best relationship is not some place where, you can go when you're right and when you're comfortable. The best relationship is when you got a friend where you could be at your worst. So think about that from a business perspective. You don't have to worry about a hit record if you got a bunch of people who accept you for who you are. Now, when you don't have to worry about a hit record, guess what your likelihood of creating some great music will be? Much higher, right? Risk is correlated with return from a financial perspective. The more you're safe at taking risks, the more return you're going to have. But too many people concentrate on the return or they concentrate on lowering the risk.
Mm,
My point of view is concentrate on the environment around you, make that safe enough so you could take a preferred risk that might be a lot more. And then the return is commensurate. But, again, that's something that I think now people are catching on to. But before, when all the money was easy, it was hard to convince people of that.
mm. I mean, people do. You have to look at everything. I mean, I think that's true. Also, kind of in the corporate world, right? People are learning very quickly that you can't get this stuff done without relationships, right? When you think about the fact that everything is remote, we used to get on a plane and go to have a meeting and do whatever it might have been. I would argue that a lot of that shifted forever, frankly, right? We people are not going to be nearly as motivated to hop on planes and do things. Some people will, but most people, even kind of when you
Mm-hmm.
think about what working from home looks like, right? So the I want to kind of pick up on something that you said, because that relationship and value thing are, I think, probably of everything you said, the two things that stick out in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, what do you think the biggest shift is going to be on the other side of this in terms of what those relationships produce?
Yeah, I think, a huge shift is going to be a lot of industries depend on information asymmetry, meaning, the people at the top hold all of the information, right? And therefore they use that information as a tool, whether it's within a company, right? Executives to workers, or whether it's within a market, few companies and the customers. Now that you have so much information available and you don't have that power dynamic where you can hoard it, I think it's going to be a real shift in how you really create value. And the value is going to be around packaging and services as opposed to getting sort of unique positions. And what do I mean by that? You take things like the gas station, right? Gas stations generally make money because of proximity, right? They literally, whoever's nearest to you with fundamentally a price that's the same as everyone else is going to get the majority of your business because based on convenience. As people move towards electric cars, they're charging things at home, etc. Well, guess what? Now you're going to be, whether you're charging or whether you're fueling, it's going to be much more around what are the services that people are providing there outside of that basic commodity. And I look at that as really metaphor for all businesses. Why do people go to the movie theaters? Right? I think you're seeing, particularly in entertainment right now, that it isn't so much people miss the movie. People miss everything around the movie, that ritual of meeting up and going out, of getting the popcorn, the soda, and honestly decompressing for 2 hours, frankly, in an environment that's climate controlled. That's why summer movies do better, right? It
Mm,
isn't because people just value being in the dark. People value a cool place that you can get away from that. And so what people are seeing is, guess what? And I won't mention names, certain movies aren't going to do well at home. They just aren't. And it has nothing to do with the quality of the movie. It's that, well, wait a minute, of the, I'm making up a number, of the $1 billion in box office, it wasn't just because people wanted to see the movie. Maybe 400 million of that was, I just didn't have anything to do that Saturday. And so, therefore, how do you actually change it so that the service you provide, right, at home is similar? That I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but I do know they're going to do something, right? And candidly, I'm excited about it because, and this gets to something you didn't ask, but something I wanted to make sure we say, particularly for those people around the globe who belong to groups that have been underrepresented in entertainment. This is not necessarily a time that you should be pessimistic. I actually believe this is the most optimistic time. Whenever the board is reset, whenever there's a shakeup, it benefits the people who haven't had a seat at the table. It really, truly does if you look historically. So I actually love the fact that the race got paused for a second because it allows those in the back, like me, you, and other people who might be listening, right, a chance to regroup, and refuel, and let's go again. Because if you start the race 10 minutes before me, right, and we both run at the same speed, am I ever going to catch up?
Mm.
Never, right? So, one or two things. You pause and I keep going and take advantage of the fact that you're paused, right? Or I pray to God, somehow I can run faster than normal. And so I look at this as a little bit of both. Here's our chance to run faster than normal, but more importantly, here's our chance to keep running through the pain, through all of this pandemic, keep running so that we can finally catch up. Because listen, I hope that people slip. I hope that some of the executives in the mainstream companies are distracted. That doesn't mean I'm not affected, but trust me, every day I'm in this basement thinking about how we're going to do this thing better, faster, stronger, quicker. And my goal is, I want them to stop. I want them to actually slip up. That's the only way we're going to make it.
Well, that and you brought me to a very interesting point, and probably one that we'll have to close on. I can't believe this time is going so quickly. Around equity, right, and what equity actually means, and that is about leveling the playing field. And I do think that whilst there have been, it's highlighted. This time has highlighted all of the inequity. There's a space for folks to be able to take a place at the table they didn't have before. And you're seeing that with all the various appointments that are happening all the time that weren't happening before, particularly in leadership roles for people of color, right? And that is changing very quickly. The question I have is about the window closing, and that's for another conversation, and how long people will pay attention, right? Because attention spans are short, particularly as things start to pick up. But I'll leave that one there. And so thank you for bringing that up about representation and equity, because that's a really important part of the entirety of this summit, but also our conversation. So last question, pearl of wisdom, piece of advice that you can give people as they're trying to navigate. You said keep going. You've said some amazing things. Spiritual north, understanding your spiritual north, betting on the collective, adversity breeds togetherness, the 8-10-12 framework, which is priceless. What's your last piece of advice for people?
To be honest, I think the last piece of advice I would say is keep moving, right? So at the end of the day, an idle mind is a playground. So keep learning, keep reading, keep talking, keep moving, just keep going, right? The more you're moving, the harder it is for anything to catch you, including yourself. And I guess maybe, I'll stick in two pieces, which is just watch how you talk to you. That would be my biggest advice, and I'll give you an analogy someone gave me that I use often, which is that everyone has a GPS, just about, who has an automobile. When you get inside the car, you want to go to my house, you plug in the destination first. As you go to that destination, if you miss a turn, if you take the wrong exit, it clearly just reminds you, reroutes you, and keeps going. It doesn't holler at you. It doesn't chastise you. The only thing that changes is time and distance. If for some reason you don't make it to my house in a certain period of time, does the car actually second guess you and say, well, you didn't really need to go over to Steve's house. Why don't you stop by India's? That's much better, right? So think about the fact that we programmed, right, a navigation aid to us that talks to us better, clearer, and with more empathy than sometimes we talk to ourselves. So when you miss that turn, when you take the wrong exit in life, when you stop over and have a pit stop, just watch how you talk to yourself. Maybe talk to yourself with that same monotone thing. Maybe talk to yourself with that same sort of commitment, like, we're going to get to the destination. Might take us longer. We might drive further. We might need to stop for gas. But don't stop and don't second guess.
Steve, thank you so much for this. I mean, the two things I'm going to say to close is that essentially grant yourself grace And you have to think about self care along this journey because we have to keep going. But to do that, we have to look after ourselves, take care of ourselves, surround ourselves with the support that we need to be able to do that. As you said, it's the collective that helps us kind of forge that path. So thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure. I'm sure that everybody will agree. I'm sure you all agree that this has been an amazing conversation. And I hope to see you soon. Well, I'll see you on Friday, probably.
Absolutely. And thank you for doing this because this is part of self care, is you enabling people to get this kind of information and feedback.
Thank you. See you soon.
All right.